Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we bring you 7 of the most disturbing true Grand Canyon Skull Cliff horror stories ever whispered about those jagged rims and shadowed chasms. These are not campfire inventions, but first-hand confessions. From hikers, climbers, workers, and wanderers who crossed paths with something they cannot fully explain. Some speak of hidden bone ledges and silent collectors, others of voices riding the canyon wind, strange rituals traced in lantern light, and encounters that fracture the mind long after the trail has ended. Every account you will hear has been cross-checked as far as possible, from timeline details to park records and local testimony, to ensure that what you are about to listen to is rooted in real experiences rather than fabricated legend. The Grand Canyon is more than a scenic postcard. It is an ancient wound in the earth that seems to hold on to the worst things people bring into it. And sometimes it gives those things back. If you value authentic horror that respects the truth behind the terror, subscribe to Buried Files and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next descent into the unknown. After you hear these stories, share your own encounters or family canyon legends in the comments below, because some of the most unsettling files we uncover begin with a single, frightened memory. Now settle in as we approach the edge of Skull Cliff and look down into the darkness that waits below. Let me start with the one thing everyone always asks me first. No, I did not report it the same day I found the skulls. I should have. I know that. It is the first thing I think about when I wake up now. That small, cowardly pause where I convinced myself I was seeing something else. If I had listened to my gut instead of my ego, I might have saved someone, or at least stopped whatever is still happening up there. My name is Cooper, and up until last spring, the Grand Canyon was my escape. I am not a ranger or a climber, just a guy who takes too many photos and spends too much time online. I got obsessed with this unofficial challenge people do, trying to capture faces in the rock. There are whole threads where people share formations that look like skulls, spirits, you name it. Skull Cliff was the crown jewel of that obsession. It is not an official name on the map, just a nickname the internet gave to a certain stretch of rim where the eroded stone, at the right angle, really does look like a row of staring skulls. I went in the off-season because I wanted empty overlooks and moody skies. I did not want crowds or guided tours. I wanted long hours alone with my camera, waiting for the light to hit that skull profile just right. I told my friends I was chasing art. The truth is, I was chasing something else too. That feeling you get standing on the edge of a drop so deep you cannot see the bottom properly. It makes the rest of your life feel small enough to carry. The first bone was nothing. At least, that is what I told myself. It was the second afternoon, a little spur off the main trail near Skull Cliff. There was a faded sign about staying on marked paths because of recent incidents. But the footprints heading past it were old and many, and my brain did that stupid rationalization thing. If all these people walked out there, it must be fine. A few yards out, in a patch of reddish dust, I noticed something white propped up on a flat stone. It was a small bone, maybe from a rabbit or a bird, stood upright like a candle. 2 other tiny bones lay at its base in a neat triangle. I remember crouching and thinking some kid was playing prehistoric altar and forgot to kick it apart. I took a photo anyway. It looked stark and weird against the dust. When I turned around to leave, a gust of wind hit the back of my neck so hard I had to plant my hiking pole not to stumble. It rattled the little bones together with a clack that sounded too loud for what they were. That night in my cheap motel just outside the park, I zoomed in on the bone picture. My brain wanted it to be art, some strange found installation I could post for likes. I told myself it was that and went to sleep. By the third day, I had started going off trail on purpose. I never did that before. I used to roll my eyes at people who ignored signs, but the canyon plays tricks with scale and distance. It makes the forbidden spots feel close enough to touch. Just a few yards more, just around that outcrop, just down to that ledge for one shot, then I will come back. That was the bargain I kept making with myself. Farther along the rim, I found the second arrangement. This time it was not just one bone. 3 long, thin bones, maybe from a coyote or something similar, were laid in a rough triangle. In the center, a smooth oval stone, stained a darker brown, sat like an egg. Tiny teeth, at least they looked like teeth, were pressed into the dust along one side of the triangle in a crooked row, like a lopsided grin. The back of my neck prickled. It did not look random anymore. It looked like something that had been made, and made recently. No dust had settled on top of the pieces. There were faint boot prints near it, different tread than mine, wider stride, deeper bite into the ground, like whoever made them was carrying weight. Again, I did what I always do. I lifted my camera. I framed it, adjusted the focus, clicked. When I straightened up, there was that same heavy wind, a sudden blast that came from below, lifting grit into my eyes. I told myself someone local was just screwing around, leaving creepy bone art for hikers. Some metalhead kid with too much time and access to roadkill. I muttered, half amused, half unnerved. I stayed on the main path the rest of that day, but my attention kept drifting back toward the places just beyond the railings, where prints led away into the scrub. The third find was the one I cannot shrug off, even now. It was on day 4, late afternoon, clouds rolling in from the west in a thick gray line. I had been following a faint social path along the rim, away from the standard Skull Cliff viewpoint where everyone takes the same shot. The air smelled like rain and sun-baked stone. My legs ached in that good way that tells you you have earned your exhaustion. I was about to turn back when I saw another clearing of dust between 2 clusters of scrub. In the center of that patch lay a skull. I froze. For a few seconds, I could not tell if it was animal or human. It was small, but not coyote small, and the jaw was missing. The way it was positioned, tilted slightly upward, made it look like it was staring straight at the sky. Around it, in a perfect circle, lay a ring of stones and bone shards, every gap the same width, every piece pointing inward. I went down to my knees before my brain caught up and started screaming inside my head. Do not touch it. Do not move it. Do not even breathe too hard. The emptiness of the canyon swallowed the sound of my heartbeat so thoroughly that I felt like I was listening from underwater. The top of the skull was cracked in a branching pattern, like dried mud. One of those fine cracks had a thread of dark red still clinging inside. Fresh is the only word I have. Fresh, not old. Whatever had happened to the owner of that skull had not happened long ago. It did not belong to some decades-old accident quietly eroding away in the sun. There were boot prints again, clearer here, circling the ring. They stepped carefully between the stones and shards, never on them. Whoever had done this took their time. Not one scuff mark, not one crushed splinter. I did not take a picture. That detail matters to me. I reached for my camera and my hand locked up halfway to the strap. My skin crawled at the thought of recording it, like that would make me complicit somehow. I backed away on hands and feet, like a crab, never turning my back on that ring. Every step away felt wrong, but every step closer to it had felt worse. The path I had followed petered out into rough rock a few yards later. When I looked back, the clearing was already half hidden by the angle of the slope. I could have climbed higher to keep it in sight. But some part of me was terrified of seeing someone else step into that little circle. So I forced myself back to the main trail, almost jogging, my boots slipping in the dust. I told myself I would go straight to the ranger station. I even rehearsed what I would say. I found what I think is a human skull off the main trail near the Skull Cliff area. There are arranged bones and prints. I understand I was not supposed to be there, but I think you need to see it. That was the plan, clear in my head as I drove toward the visitor center. Then the sky opened up. A wall of rain hit the windshield so hard the wipers could not keep up. Lightning cracked across the far rim in jagged forks. The parking lot was a sheet of ripples. I pulled into my motel instead, my justification already forming. The rain will wash away any trace. There's no point dragging rangers into a storm to look for something that will be mud within an hour. That was the exact thought. There is no point. I lay on the bed in damp clothes, staring at the water-streaked window. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was dark. The storm had passed, and the guilt had settled in like a weight on my chest. I told myself I would go back in the morning and mark the GPS coordinates if I could find the spot again. That night, someone knocked on my door. It was not the polite, hesitant tap of housekeeping or the heavy bang of some drunk getting the wrong room. It was 3 slow, measured raps, evenly spaced. I sat up, heart hammering, and listened. Silence followed, thick and absolute. I checked the peephole. The balcony outside was empty, just the empty rail and the black drop beyond it. On the little table by the window, where I had lined up my extra memory cards and spare batteries, something white caught my eye. A shard of bone, no bigger than my thumb, lay exactly in the center of the table. I had not brought any bone into the room. I am sure of that. I had forced myself to leave the earlier little arrangements undisturbed. I did not touch it. I did not sleep much after that either. The next morning, I went back to the same section of rim, shaky but determined. I followed my own prints from the day before as best I could, recognizing scuffs on certain rocks, the way some bushes bent over the path. The clearing should have been ahead, maybe 20 or 30 more steps. Nothing. Just undisturbed dust and scrub. No ring, no shards, no skull. The area felt wrong, though, like standing in a room someone has cleaned too thoroughly after something ugly happened there. The dust looked smoother than it should have after a storm. There were boot prints, but they were messy now, overlapping strides going in and out in different directions. I saw imprints with a deeper heel than my own boots, pressed right up to the edge of the drop, then turning away. I tried to rationalize. Animals could have dragged the skull off. Rain could have scattered the circle. Other hikers might have trampled through. But that did not explain the shard in my room. It did not explain the new set of prints that led away from where the ring had been, angling back toward the safer, more traveled path. They were newer than mine. I could tell. The edges of each impression in the softened dirt were crisp, not crumbled. Whoever made them had been there after the storm, after I left. I almost went to the rangers then. I stood near one of those emergency call boxes, hand hovering near the button. My chest felt tight. My ears were ringing. A tour group clustered a few yards away at a railing, chattering and taking selfies with the canyon spread out behind them. None of them looked at the ground, at the faint prints leading back into the brush. In the end, I did nothing. I told myself again that without the ring, Without the skull, all I had was a feeling and a story I had partly brought on myself by going off trail. I pressed my nails into my palms until half moons rose, turned away from the call box, and walked on. The last day of the trip, I went to Skull Cliff proper one more time, the official viewpoint with its waist-high rail and warning signs. Families leaned against the metal, kids dangling phones on flimsy selfie sticks over 1,000 feet of air. I hated them for being there and envied them for not knowing what it feels like to see a human skull laid out like an offering. I took a few half-hearted pictures of the profile everyone loves, tried to lose myself in lines and shadows. That was when I saw him. He stood a little way down the rim from the main platform in a patch of scrub just out of bounds. You would not have noticed him if you were not already looking for something wrong. Plain khaki clothes, sun hat pulled low, nothing remarkable from a distance. But his stance was too still. The way he faced the drop was not like the tourists who leaned forward and then flinched back. He stood like someone posing a question to the abyss and waiting patiently for an answer. His boots were the same style I had seen around the ring. I could not see the tread from that distance, but I knew. The angle of his feet, slightly turned outward, matched the prints I had been following. Our eyes never met, or at least I do not think they did. He did not look toward the platform. He just watched the emptiness below, hands loose at his sides. Then he bent down, slowly, and I saw a flash of white between his fingers as he straightened. Not a rock. Too smooth, too curved. He held it casually, like someone holding a cigarette they have not lit yet. I backed away from the railing. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I wanted to shout, to point, to drag a ranger over by the collar, but I could not make my throat work. By the time I reached the end of the platform and pushed through the little knot of people to look again, the patch of scrub was empty. No man, no flash of white. I left that day. I drove out of the park with the radio off, gripping the steering wheel tight enough to make my hands ache. I did finally call the park later from home, when my courage and my guilt fought themselves to a standstill. They were polite. They took notes. They told me they would forward the information to law enforcement, and that if I had photographs, I could submit them for review. I went through every card from that week. Hundreds of photos of rock and sky and shadow. The first little bone arrangement is there. So is the second, with its triangle and teeth. The clearing with the skull is not. There is a gap where those shots should be, invisible until you count. The file names skip numbers. The timestamps stutter. One moment I am photographing a juniper tree twisted into a pretzel by the wind. The next I am back on the main trail, framing the canyon's layered walls like nothing is wrong. I did not delete those files. I know I did not. Yet they are gone. What I have now are memories I wish I could doubt, and the knowledge that somewhere along that rim, someone is arranging bones in careful shapes, taking what the canyon gives them and shaping it into something worse. I was close enough to see the work, to smell the dust still clinging to the bone, and I walked away. I check missing persons databases now the way other people check sports scores. Every time I see a new face last seen near the canyon, my stomach turns over. I picture that cracked skull, that careful ring. I picture the man in khaki with his hat pulled low, holding white between his fingers while everyone else points their cameras in the other direction. I did not see his face clearly that day, but I remember one thing in sharp, nauseating detail. As I backed away from the overlook, my eyes dropped to my own pack for a second. Hanging from the zipper was a little charm, tied on with frayed red thread, a tiny thing made of white and brown. two small bones crossed in an X, with a smooth, oval pebble knotted at their center. I do not know when it was attached. I do not know who did it. I tore it off and dropped it into the nearest trash can. But it did not feel like enough. It felt like throwing away a warning instead of heeding it. So this is my real confession. Not that I saw bones on Skull Cliff. Not that I might have crossed paths with a killer. My confession is that I knew on some level that something was very wrong up there, and I chose again and again to act like I did not. If there is a collector working that rim, curating skulls and hidden ledges, I walked through his gallery and left the door open behind me. And when the wind hits the back of my neck now, in any city, on any street, it feels exactly like it did up there, pushing me just a little closer to the edge. Anytime the wind whistles now, I hear her trying to talk through it. I do not mean that as a metaphor or some poetic way to describe trauma. I mean it literally. When a draft slips under a door or rattles through a cracked window, there is a voice layered inside it, breathy and wet, forming syllables I can almost understand. It started the day I stood in that wind gap near Skull Cliff, and it has not stopped since. My name is Scarlet, and I went to the Grand Canyon for all the wrong reasons. It was not about nature or solitude or finding myself. It was about getting a good backdrop for content. I was in my third year of college, majoring in something I did not care about, and spending most of my energy on building an aesthetic online. My friends and I planned the trip like we planned everything else, around lighting and angles and which locations would pull the most engagement. We had a list of spots to hit, poses to replicate, captions already half written before we even left campus. Skull Cliff was on that list because it trends. The rock formation that looks like a row of skulls when you shoot it from the south rim at sunset, that eerie profile everyone reposts, with some variation of the same caption about nature being metal. We wanted that shot. We wanted to stand in front of it with our hair blowing just right, looking small and brave against something vast and indifferent. The day we went out there, the wind was already acting strange. I do not know how else to put it. Wind is wind, right? It blows, it gusts, it dies down. But that afternoon, it felt like it had intention. It would go completely still for long stretches, then suddenly whip up from below the rim in a single hard blast that made you stagger. One of my friends laughed and said it felt like the canyon was breathing. I remember that because an hour later, I would have given anything to believe it was just the canyon and not something inside it. We split up to get different angles. That was the plan. Some of us would shoot from the main overlook. Others would hike a little farther along the rim to get the profile from a less crowded spot. I volunteered to go ahead because I wanted a shot without other people in the frame. I was vain that way. I wanted it to look like I had discovered the place, like I was alone with the sublime. So I walked away from the group, following a narrow trail that curved closer to the edge. About 10 minutes out, I found a gap in the rock. It was not large, maybe 3 feet across, just a natural split in the stone where wind funneled through from the canyon below. When I stepped close to it, the sound changed. It went from a low whistle to something higher, almost musical, like someone blowing across the mouth of a bottle. I stopped and held my phone up, thinking the audio would be perfect for a video. I pressed record and leaned toward the gap. The wind stopped, not slowed, stopped completely. The air went dead and flat, and in that silence I heard my name. Scarlet. It was so quiet I thought I imagined it, a trick of my own thoughts leaking into the stillness. But then it came again, louder, and this time it sounded wrong. The voice was layered, like two people speaking at once, One layer was normal, a woman's voice, middle range, almost friendly. The other was lower, gurgling, like someone trying to talk through water. "Scarlett, are you there?" I pulled back from the gap so fast, I almost dropped my phone. My heart slammed in my chest. I looked around, expecting to see someone behind me, maybe one of my friends playing a prank. The trail was empty. The scrub on either side was low and sparse. No one could hide there. I turned back to the gap, and the wind hit me full in the face, sudden and sharp, smelling faintly of damp stone and something else, something organic and rotten. My phone was still recording. I could see the little red dot in the corner of the screen, the seconds ticking up. I lifted it and aimed the camera at the gap, not sure what I was trying to capture. In the screen, in the live image, there was a woman standing directly behind me. She was close, inches away. Her face over my left shoulder. Pale skin, dark hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes half open. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came from it. Just that same wet gurgle riding the wind. I screamed and spun around, but there was nothing there. Just empty air and the trail stretching back the way I had come. I looked at my phone. The recording was still going. I played back the last few seconds. In the playback, the woman was there, clear as anything, standing behind me in the frame. But when I looked up from the screen, the space behind me was empty. I could feel my pulse in my throat, fast and fluttering. I stopped the recording, shoved the phone in my pocket, and walked as fast as I could back toward my friends without actually running. When I found them, I did not say anything. I told myself I would sound insane. I told myself it was a glitch, some kind of lens flare or compression artifact that my brain interpreted as a face. We took our photos at the Overlook, smiled and posed and joked. And the whole time, I kept my back to something solid, so nothing could stand behind me. That night at the lodge, I finally watched the video all the way through. The woman was there in every frame after I leaned toward the gap. Sometimes she was behind me. Sometimes she was beside me, just at the edge of the shot, her face turned toward the canyon. Her mouth never stopped moving. I tried to read her lips, to figure out what she was saying. But the angle was wrong, and her expression was too slack. I posted the video to a few friends in a private group chat, asking if they saw what I saw. 2 of them thought it was a filter I had added as a joke. One said it looked creepy and asked where I got the overlay. Nobody believed it was real. I deleted the video from my phone after that, but it did not matter. The voice had already started. The next day, back near Skull Cliff, I kept hearing fragments of sentences in the wind. They were not full words, just pieces, always in that same layered tone. Left and alone, and so cold, and please. My friends did not hear it. I asked them directly, trying to keep my voice casual, and they looked at me like I was being weird for the sake of being weird. The wind is just wind, Scarlett. You are freaking yourself out. But I was not freaking myself out. The wind was talking. I knew it the same way you know when someone is standing too close behind you, that prickling certainty that has nothing to do with logic. We hiked out to a different section that afternoon, farther from Skull Cliff, and for a while, I felt better. The wind there was normal. It rustled through juniper branches and kicked up little dust devils. But it did not speak. I let myself relax, thinking maybe I had just been too close to that gap, that whatever acoustic trick made the sound was localized to that one spot. Then we stopped for a break near another overlook, and one of my friends pointed out a plaque mounted on a stone cairn. It was a memorial, the kind they put up for people who died in the park. I walked over to read it. Half interested, half just needing something to focus on that was not the sky or the drop. The plaque had a name, a date, and a brief inscription, in loving memory of a woman who loved these trails, lost to the canyon, but never forgotten. There was a photo etched into the metal, small and worn by weather, but clear enough. It was her, the woman from the video. The same dark hair, the same shape of the eyes. I felt the air leave my lungs. I checked the date. She had gone missing almost 7 years ago, last seen on a trail near the south rim. They never found her body. The plaque did not say how she died, just that she was lost. I stood there staring at her face until one of my friends called my name and asked if I was coming. I did not tell them. What would I say? That the woman in my video was a ghost? That she had been standing behind me trying to speak, and I had deleted her like a bad take? I followed my friends back to the trailhead and tried to act normal, but my hands would not stop shaking. That night, I went back to the wind gap alone. I do not know why. Maybe I thought if I confronted it, the voice would stop. Maybe I wanted proof I was not losing my mind. I told my friends I was going to the lodge lobby to get a snack, then doubled back and took the trail in the dark, with just my phone flashlight to guide me. The gap was easy to find. Even in the dark, the wind pouring through it made a low, keening sound. I stood in front of it and forced myself to speak. I am listening. I said it out loud, my voice sounding small and stupid against the emptiness. If you are trying to tell me something, I am listening now. The wind stopped again, that same sudden cutoff, like someone holding their breath. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the voice came back, and this time it was clear. You always walk away. It was not an observation. It was an accusation. The voice was bitter, sharp, and under it was that gurgling layer, wet and desperate. I felt my skin go cold. I did not walk away from you, I said, my voice cracking. I did not even know you were there. The wind picked up, a hard gust that nearly knocked me back a step. The voice came faster, overlapping itself, the words tumbling out in a rush. You always walk away. You see and you leave. You leave us here. Why do you always leave? I realized with a sick lurch that she was not talking to me specifically. She was talking to everyone who had ever stood at that gap, looked into the canyon, felt something wrong, and turned around. I was just the first one who stayed long enough to hear her all the way through. I tried to explain, stammering, that I did not know how to help, that I did not understand what she wanted. But the wind grew louder, drowning me out, and the voice fractured into multiples. It was not just her anymore. There were others, men and women, and something that might have been a child, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. Do not leave. Do not leave. Do not leave. I backed away from the gap, my breath coming fast and shallow, and the voices followed me. They rode every gust, hissing through the scrub, circling around me like I was standing in the center of a storm. I turned and ran, stumbling on loose rock, my flashlight beam jerking wildly across the trail. When I reached the main path, the wind died. The voices stopped. I stood there gasping, my legs trembling, waiting for it to start again. It did not. The night was still and clear, just the distant sound of traffic on the rim road and the soft chirp of insects in the brush. I went back to the lodge and did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face in my phone screen, her mouth moving silently, and I heard the layered voice asking why I always walk away. I left the canyon the next morning, cutting the trip short with some excuse about a family emergency. My friends were annoyed, but they did not push it. The drive home was quiet. I kept the windows up, but it did not matter. The voice came back the first time I parked in a concrete garage and heard the echo of my car door slamming. It came back when I opened my apartment window and felt the breeze slip through. It comes back every single time the air moves in a way that makes sound. It is quieter now, most of the time, just a whisper under the noise of daily life. But when the wind picks up, when it really howls through a gap or a vent or an open door, I hear her clearly. Sometimes she asks why I left. Sometimes she just says my name. Once, she said something that made my blood run cold. I am still at the Gap. Are you coming back? I do not go near the Grand Canyon anymore. I do not even look at pictures of it. But I think about her constantly and the others, all those voices layered together in the wind. I think about how many people have stood where I stood, heard something strange, and walked away without listening. I did not walk away. I listened. And now I cannot unhear it. So if you ever visit Skull Cliff, and you find a place where the wind sounds wrong, do not lean in close. Do not ask it questions, because if it answers, you will carry that answer with you everywhere the air moves for the rest of your life. I grew up thinking the story about the skull in the cliff was just a drunk uncle's campfire trick until I found it. Now I know some legends exist because people need a way to warn each other about things they cannot explain outright without sounding insane. My family has been going to the Grand Canyon for 3 generations. It is not a vacation spot for us. It is something closer to a pilgrimage, a place we return to because the land feels like it owns a piece of us, whether we like it or not. My name is Archie, and the first time I heard about the carved skull, I was maybe 7 years old. We were camped near the South Rim, close enough to what people online now call Skull Cliff, though back then we just called it the Far Overlook. My uncle had been drinking, the way he always did on these trips, and he leaned forward into the firelight with that look he got when he wanted to scare the kids. He told us about a stone face carved into the rock, hidden down a ledge that no trail leads to anymore. He said it was old, older than the park, maybe older than the tribes that used to live there, though he did not know who made it or why. The story went that the carving watched over a burial site, and if you disturbed the bones or showed disrespect, the stone face would know. It would follow you. He said the way you could tell it had noticed you was simple. If you whistled near it, the eyes would open. We laughed, of course. Even at 7, I knew it was the kind of story adults told to keep kids from wandering off and getting hurt. But my uncle got serious then, his face going hard in a way that made the laughter die in our throats. He said he had seen it once, years ago, before I was born. He and his brother, my father, had gone down to find it on a dare. My father whistled at the carving, mocking it, and my uncle swore he saw the shadow in the eye sockets shift, like something behind the stone had moved forward to look. They left and never went back. My father refused to talk about it. Even now, decades later, if you bring up that trip, he changes the subject or leaves the room. I did not think about that story much growing up. It was just part of the family mythology, the kind of thing you half remember and mostly ignore. But last year I came back to the canyon alone for the first time. I had just turned 30, been through a bad breakup, lost a job I hated but needed, and I wanted to prove something to myself. I am not sure what. That I could still do hard things, maybe. That I was not afraid of empty spaces, inside or out. I brought the old notebook my uncle used to keep, the one with his hand-drawn maps and trail notes from back when the park was less regulated and you could wander farther without someone stopping you. Tucked in the back was a page I'd never noticed before. A rough sketch of the South Rim with an X, marked below the main trail, and a few scrawled directions. Find the split juniper. Descend west along the seam. Look for the red shelf. Face is below, south side. I told myself I was just curious. I told myself I wanted to see if the carving was even real, or if it was just a weirdly shaped shadow my uncle had misremembered through a haze of alcohol and time. But the truth is, I wanted to prove the story wrong. I wanted to stand in front of that carving, whistle at it, and feel nothing. I wanted to be the one who killed the family ghost story with evidence and daylight. It took me most of the morning to find the split juniper. The tree was old and lightning struck, its trunk forked into a clean Y that framed a section of empty sky. From there I worked my way down, using the seam in the rock as a guide. It was not a trail, just a line where the stone had cracked and eroded into a narrow ramp you could descend if you were careful and stupid. Halfway down, I found the red shelf, a flat ledge maybe 6 feet wide, stained dark rust from iron in the stone. And there, carved into the south-facing wall, was the skull. It was crude, not the kind of thing you would see in a museum. The proportions were off. The jaw was too wide and the eye sockets were too deep, gouged into the rock like someone had taken a chisel and just kept digging. But it was unmistakably a face, unmistakably human, staring out over the canyon with empty black eyes. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it. The wind was calm. The sun was bright. It should have felt silly, like I had hiked all that way to see bad graffiti. But it did not feel silly. It felt old. It felt wrong in a way I could not articulate, like the proportions of the carving were off because it was not trying to look human. It was trying to look like what is left when the human part is gone. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I wanted proof. I wanted to show my uncle, my father, anyone who remembered the story. I walked closer, narrating like I was making a little documentary, explaining where I was and what I'd found. And then, because I am an idiot, I whistled. It was not a tune, just a single sharp note, the kind you use to get someone's attention. It echoed off the rock and died fast, swallowed by the space below. For a moment, nothing happened. I laughed, felt the tension drain out of my shoulders, and turned to get a better angle on the carving. That was when I noticed the shadows in the eye sockets had changed. I do not mean the light shifted. The sun had not moved. But the depth of the black inside those carved eyes looked different. Less like empty stone and more like tunnels going back farther than they should. I stepped closer, trying to convince myself it was a trick of perspective. I held up my phone and zoomed in on the right eye socket. On the screen, something moved inside it. Just a flicker, a shift of darkness against darkness, but unmistakable. I lowered the phone and looked with my naked eyes. The socket was still. I raised the phone again, looking through the camera, and there it was again, a shape deep inside the carved hole, pressing forward like it was trying to see out. My hand started shaking. I backed up, and my heel hit a loose rock that skittered off the ledge into open air. The sound it made falling seemed to go on forever, clattering down the cliff face. When I looked back at the carving, both eye sockets looked deeper, darker. The mouth, which had been a shallow line, now looked like it had cracked open slightly, a thin, vertical gap where the lower jaw met the upper skull. I shoved my phone in my pocket and climbed back up to the main trail faster than I had come down. Scraping my palms on the rock, not caring. My breath came hard and my chest felt tight. But I did not stop until I was back on flat, marked ground with other people in sight. That night at my campsite, I tried to watch the video I had taken. The file would not play. It opened, showed a single frame of the red shelf, then corrupted into static and froze. I tried 3 more times and got the same result. Every video I took that day played fine except that one. The audio worked though. I could hear my own voice explaining what I was looking at, then the whistle, sharp and clear. And under it, barely audible, something that might have been a breath. I have not whistled since. Not once. Not in the shower, not in my car, not absent-mindedly while I work. I cannot. Every time I even think about it, I feel those empty sockets staring at me from miles away, trying to see through the space between us. 3 weeks after I got home, I woke up at 3 in the morning to find a perfect circle of small stones arranged around my bed. They were the same red color as the shelf. I did not put them there. I live alone. My doors were locked. I swept them up and threw them away. But 2 nights later, I found a single stone on my pillow, just above where my head had been. It was warm. I do not know what I woke up. I do not know what the carving is or what it was supposed to guard. But I know I was warned not to whistle, and I did it anyway. And now something that lives in stone knows I am here. Some nights I dream I am back on that ledge, and the carved eyes are fully open, and the mouth is wide enough to see the dark going down and down. And I realize too late that I'm not standing in front of the skull. I am standing inside it, looking out through the eyes at a long line of people below, all of them whistling. I did not push him off Skull Cliff, but sometimes I wonder if saying yes to that hike was just a slower way of doing it. That is the sentence I never say out loud when people ask what happened that day. They want a clean story with a villain and a victim, something they can file away under true crime or tragic accident. What they get instead is a gap, like the canyon cut a piece out of time and swallowed it whole. My name is Matilda, and for 3 years before that trip, I was in one of those relationships where you are more tired than happy. We met young, moved in together too fast, and then stayed because disentangling our lives seemed harder than enduring the fights. He loved risk. I loved control. That was the fault line running through everything we did. Roller coasters, rooftop parties, late-night drives on mountain roads with no guardrails. He gravitated toward anything that made my stomach twist. He called it living. I called it tempting fate. The Grand Canyon was his idea. It was supposed to be a reset, one last attempt to fix what we both knew was broken. He booked the tickets, found a cheap lodge, made a list of must-see spots that were all some variation of standing on the edge of a very long drop. Skull Cliff was at the top. He had seen some photos online of the rock profile that looks like a giant skull and decided it would be the perfect place to take the shot. His words. The shot that would prove we were still adventurous and in love, even if we were mostly just exhausted and stubborn. The morning we hiked out there, we were already fighting. It started small. He wanted to take an unmarked spur off the main trail to get a better angle on the cliff. I pointed out the faded warning sign and the fact that we were not exactly backcountry experts. He said the sign was for tourists and flip-flops, not for us, and that we would not see anything worth seeing if we stayed with the crowd. I said the canyon was not going anywhere, and neither was his ego. So maybe we could just take a normal hike for once. He laughed, that tight little laugh that meant he was annoyed but pretending not to be, and kept walking toward the spur. After a few seconds of stubbornly standing on the main path, I followed. That was our pattern. He pushed, I resisted. He moved farther away. and eventually I went after him, because I was more afraid of being left than of whatever he was dragging us toward. The spur narrowed quickly. The scrub thinned out, replaced by bare rock sloping toward the rim. On our right, the canyon opened up in layers of red and brown and shadow. On our left, the rock face of Skull Cliff loomed, its eroded curves and hollows forming that unmistakable skull shape when you turned your head just so. Up close, it looked less like a face and more like something caught mid-scream. We found a flat outcrop that jutted over the drop, just wide enough for two people to stand side by side if they did not mind their toes hanging over the edge. He stepped onto it without hesitation, arms spread, the wind playing with his shirt. I hung back, heart hammering. "Come on," he said, grinning. "This is the shot, Matilda, just for a second." I do not know why I did it. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the part of me that still wanted proof we could be that couple, the one in the photos, fearless and intertwined. I stepped onto the outcrop and let him pull me close, his arm around my shoulders, his phone held out in the other hand. He kissed my temple just as the shutter clicked. For a second, everything went quiet. The wind eased. The birds below were just specks circling in slow arcs. And I thought, maybe this is what we were trying to get back to, that brief, fragile feeling of being on the same side. We stepped back from the edge. I turned toward the slope to check the photo, still catching my breath. He stayed facing the drop. "It is perfect," I said, looking at our faces on the screen. We actually looked happy, not strained, not pretending, just soft. "Let me get one of the skull," he replied. From farther out. I did not look up immediately. I was zooming in, checking the lighting, thinking about how I would caption it when we got back to the lodge. I could hear his footsteps, the scrape of his boots on rock, moving a few feet to my right. Then the sound stopped. I lifted my head. The outcrop was empty. At first, my brain did not register what I was seeing. I expected him to be there, in my peripheral vision, a solid presence in a red shirt and sun hat. Instead, there was only stone and the horizon. My heart did a strange lurch, like it had been misfiring all along and had finally skipped a beat too many. "Hey," I called, turning in a quick circle. "Very funny." No answer. The trail behind me was empty. The rock face to my left was smooth, no ledges or crevices big enough to hide a person. The outcrop in front of me dropped straight into open air. I walked to the edge and forced myself to look down. The canyon fell away in a sheer wall, studded with ledges and outcroppings far below. My vision swam. I pressed my stomach flat against the rock and craned my neck, searching for any flash of red, any movement, any sign that he had slipped and was clinging to something. Nothing. No sound but the wind. No rock still tumbling, no echo of a shout. Just empty vertical distance swallowing the space where he should have been. I do not know how long I lay there, calling his name until my voice went raw. Time does something strange at the edge of a drop. Seconds stretch, minutes snap. At some point, I stumbled back toward the main trail, shaking so hard I could barely walk, and found another hiker who helped me call for help. After that, everything is fragments. Rangers asking the same questions over and over. Where were you standing? How far from the edge? Did he jump? Did you see him lose his footing? Helicopters sweeping the walls with searchlights, tiny figures on ropes scanning ledges below. Dogs sniffing along the rim. Radios crackling with codes I did not understand. They did not find him. Not that day, not the next, not ever. No body, no backpack, no hat. Nothing. People love to talk about statistics when they hear this part. They tell me how many people fall into the canyon every year, how wind and loose rock and human error are a bad combination. They say sometimes bodies get wedged in places too deep to reach or carried off by sudden storms. They say I am lucky not to have watched it happen, as if the lack of a visible fall makes it easier. What nobody explains is this. His footprints stopped 3 feet before the edge. I saw them when the rangers walked me back to the spot for the official reconstruction. 2 sets of tracks leading along the spur. Ours. You could see where we stood together on the outcrop, our boot prints overlapping, slightly smeared. Then a few prints from when we stepped back. Mine veered inward toward the slope. His continued straight, but not all the way. There was a clear heel mark, then the ball of the foot, then nothing. No disturbed dust at the rim, no scuffed rock, no sliding marks. Just a clean end to the pattern, like someone had lifted him straight up or dropped him straight down without touching the in-between. I did not say it out loud. I knew how it sounded. Instead, I answered the questions, signed the statements, went back to the lodge to pack our shared suitcase alone. The seat beside me on the shuttle to the airport stayed empty. Every bump in the road felt like a hand reaching up from below. Months passed. The official story settled into its shape. Hiker presumed dead after fall near Skull Cliff. No evidence of foul play. Friends and his family cycled through grief and anger and suspicion. Some of them looked at me and saw someone who had been fighting with him that morning, who came back alone from an unmarked path she had not wanted to take. They never said the word out loud, but I heard it anyway. I tried to move on. I went back to work. I stopped going on hikes. I avoided high balconies and open stairwells. That might have been the end of it, an unsolved disappearance sitting like a stone in my chest, if I had not made the mistake of opening the photo again. It was late, and I was scrolling through old pictures, half numb, half nostalgic, when I saw the thumbnail from Skull Cliff. The one perfect shot. I told myself I should delete it. I had thought that 100 times and never had the courage. This time, instead of erasing it, I tapped it open. We were standing side by side, the canyon behind us, Skull Cliff's profile just visible over his shoulder. We looked genuinely happy, younger than we were. I stared at our faces until my vision blurred. Then I noticed the timestamp. The photo was marked as taken at 10:14 a.m. I checked the metadata. Same. 10:14, Skull Cliff Trail. Coordinates matching the spur. The problem was, I remember looking at that photo while we were still standing on the outcrop. Immediately after the shutter clicked. I remember showing it to him, both of us laughing, before he turned back toward the edge. The ranger's incident report lists the time of my emergency call as 10:12. I do not have an explanation for that. Timestamps can be wrong, I know. Phones glitch, GPS lags, but it feels like one more small, sharp piece that does not fit. I went back once, against everyone's advice. A year after he vanished, I returned to Skull Cliff alone and walked out to the same spur. The path felt shorter and longer at the same time. My breath came shallow. The outcrop looked smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk without his careless weight on it. I stayed well back from the edge. I did not step onto the overhang. I stood where my prints had turned inward, the last point where the ground still held my shape, and looked down. For a moment, I saw him. He was standing on a ledge far below, too small to recognize by features, but unmistakable by posture, one hand lifted as if shading his eyes, the other hanging loose. He was looking up the way he used to look over his shoulder at me when he wanted me to hurry. My heart lurched into my throat. I blinked, and he was gone. Just rock and shadow. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe it was my brain filling in gaps it cannot accept. Maybe it was nothing at all. What keeps me awake is not the possibility that he slipped, or that he jumped, or even that someone else was up there with us and I somehow did not see. It is the empty space where his footprints should continue, the missing seconds between one breath and the next. The way the canyon can erase a person so completely that all you have left is a story nobody entirely believes. I did not push him. I am as certain of that as anything in my life. But I also did not stop him from walking toward a place that wanted to erase him, because I had been letting him drag me to the edge of things for years, and it was easier to follow than to turn back alone. If there is a lesson in that, I have not found it. All I know is that Skull Cliff is not just a rock that looks like a skull. It is a place that knows how to take and keep and leave nothing behind but questions. And the people who loved the ones it took, standing at the rim, staring into a gap that does not echo when you call into it. The first time I yelled into Skull Cliff, I thought the echo lag was just a cool glitch. I was there with coworkers, doing one of those team-building retreats that everyone secretly hates, but pretends to enjoy because the company paid for it. We had spent the morning in a conference room talking about synergy and communication, and when they finally let us out to experience the canyon, half the group bolted for the gift shop. The rest of us wandered toward the rim like sleepwalkers. My name is Riley, and I used to love echoes. Parking garages, tunnels, empty stairwells. I would always test them with a shout or a whistle, just to hear my own voice come back thinner and distant. It made me feel like I was leaving a mark in spaces that did not care I existed. That day at the Grand Canyon, I found out some places do not just reflect what you give them. They send something else back. The overlook near Skull Cliff was crowded, but not unbearable. Coaches in company polos took group photos, couples leaned against the railing. One of my co-workers, a guy from accounting named Lee, suggested we all yell something into the canyon. It was stupid, but we were bored and a little giddy from being out of fluorescent light. People went one by one. Names, random phrases, a few curses disguised as jokes. The echoes came back on time, ragged but familiar, each voice stretched and thinned by distance. When it was my turn, I stepped closer to the rail, took a breath, and shouted the first thing that came to mind. I am still here. The words dropped off the edge. There was a strange pause before the echo returned, just long enough to make me think maybe this part of the canyon did not bounce sound well. Then it came back. I am not here. It was my voice. Same pitch, same rhythm, but the words were wrong. My co-workers laughed, assuming they had misheard, or that the wind had done something weird. I laughed too, because what else do you do when the canyon tells you you are not where you think you are? Say something else, Lee said, grinning. That was creepy. I should have walked away. I should have blamed it on acoustics and gone back to the bus with everyone else. Instead, I leaned forward and tried again. Who is down there? The echo came back faster this time, barely any lag at all, like the walls of the canyon had moved closer. Who is up there? The hairs on my arms stood up. A couple of people shifted uneasily, but most of them were still amused, phones out, capturing the glitch. I forced a smile and raised my voice over the murmur. What do you want? For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No echo, no normal bounce of sound. Just dead, flat air. Then, very softly, too softly for anyone else to hear over the crowd, something answered. You. The word slipped under everything else. A joke from behind me, a camera shutter, a child complaining about the heat. I felt it more than heard it, like it crawled through my ears instead of riding them. My chest tightened. The back of my neck went cold. I stepped away from the railing, suddenly aware of how thin the metal bar was between me and a very long fall. "Okay, that is enough," I said, trying to sound light. "Acoustic show is over. I am hungry." Nobody argued. We drifted back toward the picnic area, the others already moving on to talk about lunch and travel plans. I walked in silence, replaying the last exchange in my head, trying to convince myself I had imagined that last word. That night, at the lodge, I told myself to test it. If I did not, I knew my brain would loop the moment forever, chewing on it until it turned into something bigger than it was. So after dinner, while most of my co-workers were drinking at the bar, I slipped out alone and walked back toward the rim. The overlook was mostly empty now. The sky was turning deep blue, the canyon below pooling with shadows. I went to the same spot by the railing, my hands slick with sweat, and looked out over the dark. "Hello?" I called, feeling ridiculous. My voice sounded small against all that empty space. This time, the echo came back perfectly normal. "Hello?" Same word, same tone, no variation, no delay that felt off. I felt my shoulders drop in relief. Of course it was nothing. Daytime noise, overlapping echoes, my own anxiety making patterns where there were none. "Who is there?" I tried just to be sure. "Who is there?" The canyon answered, obedient. I exhaled, leaning my weight on the rail. My heart was still thudding, but my rational mind was already filing the earlier incident under weird but explainable. I was about to walk away when a gust of wind rose from below, surprising in its force. It shoved at my chest, smelling like dust and something dry and old. In that gust, under the rush of air, a voice whispered, close and intimate, "You came back?" I froze. It was my voice again, but wrong, a half step deeper, thick with something like satisfaction. My throat went tight. "I am leaving," I said, barely above a whisper. "I am staying," the echo replied. I did not look back over the edge. I walked away, stiff and careful, as if any sudden movement might draw attention from whatever was listening. By the time I reached my room, my hands were shaking so badly I could not get the key card into the slot on the first try. I did not sleep much. When I finally drifted off toward dawn, I dreamed I was standing at the railing again, shouting into the canyon, but nothing came back, not even my own voice. It felt like the world on the other side of the edge had swallowed the sound and was waiting for me to notice. We left the next day. On the drive to the airport, I stared out the window, trying to convince myself that leaving the canyon meant leaving the weirdness behind. Echoes are a property of space, I told myself. Specific shapes, specific distances. Once I was back in the city, everything would go back to normal. For a while it did, or I managed to pretend it did. Then, a week after the trip, I parked my car in the basement of my apartment building, an echoing concrete box I had never thought twice about. I shut the door, and the sound bounced around the space the way it always did. On impulse, without thinking, I called out, "Just me." "Not just you," the space replied. I did not open my mouth that second time. My lips were pressed together, my teeth clenched. The words came from somewhere else, layered under the fading slam of the car door. My own voice, off by a fraction in timing and tone. I stood there, keys in hand, heart pounding, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint drip of water from a pipe. Nothing else? No more words. But from that night on, echoes stopped behaving the way they should. Sometimes it was small. I would drop a spoon in the kitchen, hear the clang, and a split second later, a second, softer clang that did not quite match. Other times it was clearer. I would say good night to myself out of habit, turning off the bathroom light, and hear a quiet, "Stay up," chase it down the hall. I tried to tell myself it was stress, a trick of my ear, some auditory hallucination my therapist could explain. I booked an appointment. I described what was happening, careful not to sound too dramatic. The therapist nodded, asked about my workload, my sleep, my history with anxiety. She suggested it might be my brain replaying my own words in a heightened state, like an echo in memory rather than space. It was a nice theory. I wanted to believe it. Then, one evening, I walked under a railway bridge on my way home and made a mistake. A stupid, reflexive mistake. I clapped my hands once, hard, just to hear the sound bounce. The clap came back, distorted but recognizable. Then, layered under it, a voice I did not recognize. Still mine, still wearing my inflections, but saying something I had not said. "Jump." I stopped dead. The bridge sidewalk was empty, traffic roaring a few feet away. I looked down at the street, then up at the concrete arch above me. There was nothing to jump from. There was nowhere for that word to lead. But the suggestion hung there, sour and heavy. "Shut up," I whispered. "Wake up," the echo answered. Since then, it has only gotten worse. The not echo does not need me to speak first anymore. Sometimes it starts on its own, in places with the right surfaces. Parking garages, stairwells, tiled bathrooms, empty offices. I will walk in, and instead of the normal ambient quiet, I will hear a faint murmur that sharpens if I stand still. Down here. Behind you. Almost time. The worst part is that it knows things. It references moments I have never said out loud. It mentions a scar on my arm from when I was 8, a lie I told my mother in high school, the name of someone I hurt and never apologized to. It throws them back at me in my own voice, like it has been listening from inside my skull this entire time, and finally found a way to speak. I have stopped going anywhere with obvious echoes. No more garages. I park on the street. I take stairs only when other people are on them. I shower with the door open and the fan off, so the steam does not turn the tile into a resonant chamber. Friends think I have developed new quirks. They joke about me being afraid of my own echo. They have no idea how true that is. Sometimes I think about going back to Skull Cliff, standing at that railing and asking the canyon what exactly I brought home with me. But I'm afraid of the answer. I am afraid it will not come from below, but from right behind my teeth. So here is my best guess. The thing I circle around late at night, when every room in my apartment is finally silent. Echoes are not just sound bouncing off surfaces. They are proof something is there to bounce against. Space, shape, presence. When I stood on that overlook and asked, "What do you want?" I opened a door I did not see. Whatever answered wanted a mouth. It used mine. Now, when I speak, I listen for the second version of my own words coming back from the walls. I measure how different they are, how much more they belong to it than to me. I am scared of the day when the first voice, the one I am used to calling mine, will be the echo instead, following behind something else that has learned to lead. From up on Skull Cliff, they did not look like people at first. They looked like a string of fire ants made of light, moving in single file along a ledge where there should not have been any trail at all. I was the only one out there to see it, and if it had happened anywhere but the Grand Canyon, I might have managed to convince myself it was a trick of the eyes. But the canyon has a way of turning tricks into obligations. Once you see something, you owe it your attention. My name is Zara, and that summer I worked the late shift at a lodge near the South Rim. It was the kind of seasonal job you take when you are trying to outrun a decision. Temporary, isolated, full of strangers who do not know enough to ask the right questions. I cleaned rooms, stocked the front desk fridge, and on good nights, snuck away for an hour to sit near the edge of the world and pretend I was braver than I felt. There was a strict staff curfew on paper. After midnight, everyone was supposed to be in their cabins unless they were on duty. The canyon is dangerous in the dark, they told us during orientation. Disorientation, cliffs, rattlesnakes, you name it. Do not wander. Do not drink by the rim. Do not go out alone. Most nights, I obeyed. By the time my shift ended at 11, all I wanted was a shower and sleep. But on the night of the lanterns, the air felt wrong. Too hot for the hour, too still. My body was tired and jittery at the same time, as if I had taken caffeine instead of clocking out. I walked past my cabin, past the sign that marked the staff area, and followed the quiet path toward Skull Cliff. It was a moonless night. The sky was thick with stars, that impossible spray of light you only get far from cities. The canyon below was not a landscape so much as an absence, a vast cutout of pure black. I liked it that way. It made my own problems feel like tiny scratches on the surface of something ancient. I settled on the flat rock I had claimed as my spot over the summer, a little back from the official railing, where you could see both the tourist overlook and the more jagged stretch people had nicknamed Skull Cliff. The skull itself was only a darker shape against the slightly less dark sky, but I knew where it was. Once you saw it in daylight, that hollow-eyed profile burned itself into your map of the world. I sat there for a while, letting my thoughts loosen and drift. The night was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I noticed a glow down in the blackness. At first, I thought it was a reflection from a car on the rim road, or maybe distant campers on a legal trail. But this light was too far down, halfway between the rim and the unseen floor, in a place I knew had no maintained path. It was a single point of warm, yellowish light, moving slowly along the curve of the canyon wall. I leaned forward, squinting. As it rounded a bulge of rock, another light came into view behind it, then another. Within seconds, I could see a whole line of them, maybe 20, maybe more, each separated from the next by the same small distance, bobbing and swaying with the rhythm of walking. Lanterns. That was the only word my mind supplied. Not headlamps, not flashlights. The glow was too soft, the edges too rounded. Old-fashioned lanterns. Each one held at about waist height, casting a tight pool of light around a pair of legs I could not quite make out from that distance. Nobody was supposed to be down there. I knew the map of that section as well as any staff member. The only official trail near Skull Cliff stayed much higher, hugging a safer contour. The line of lights moved along a ledge I had never seen in daylight. A narrow line of stone that looked, from above, like it would crumble if you breathed on it too hard. I told myself it was maybe a maintenance crew or a research team or some group with special permission. I told myself that because my heart had started thudding hard enough to make me feel lightheaded, and rational explanations are like pressure valves. They keep something in you from exploding. Then the line stopped. It happened all at once, like someone had given a signal. One light near the front swung in a slow circle, tracing a glowing loop in the dark, and every lantern behind it came to a halt. For a long moment, nothing moved. The canyon swallowed any sound they might have made. Then one of the lights went out, just blinked off, as cleanly as if someone had pinched the flame. The scream came a second later, and the timing is burned into me so deeply I will never forget it. First the light vanished, then the sound. A high, human scream, cut short. No echo, no scattering off the walls. Just a rising note of pure panic and then absence. I clapped a hand over my mouth, as if that would keep the noise from reaching them. The rest of the line did not react. The lantern stayed perfectly still, an unmoving chain of fire against the black. The front light swung again, in a tighter circle, and the whole line started walking once more, one lantern short. I fumbled for the binoculars we sometimes kept hidden under the rock, technically for bird watching, unofficially for spying on whichever guests were sneaking cigarettes where they were not supposed to. My fingers found the strap by muscle memory. I brought the lenses to my eyes, hands shaking. Through the binoculars, the scene sharpened. I could see robes now, or long coats, or something that made each figure look like a narrow column of darkness topped by a hood. The lanterns they carried were old and metal, glass panes flickering with real, live fire. No LED coolness, no modern gear. As they rounded a bend, their lights washed over a section of canyon wall shaped in a way that twisted my stomach. The rock there bulged and hollowed into what, from my angle, formed another skull. A gigantic one, its eye sockets just deeper pits of night. The line of lanterns passed right along its jaw. And for a moment, the way the lights spaced themselves made the whole thing look like a ribcage from above. Glowing vertebrae marching past a stone skull. The front lantern swung again. The line stopped. Another light went out, and another scream knifed up, slightly shorter this time, as if cut off deliberately. I could not tell if the figures were pushing people off the ledge or extinguishing lights as some part of a ritual. I did not want to know. My palms were slick against the binoculars. My whole body screamed at me to back away from the edge, to pretend I had seen nothing. But I stayed, frozen, watching as the process repeated. Walk, swing, stop, darkness, scream. At some point, I realized the line was not getting shorter overall. Each time a lantern went out, another light appeared at the back, as if someone new had stepped into place, already holding a flame. The total number stayed the same. The procession did not thin, it just cycled. Then one of them looked up. I do not know how I knew it from that distance, but I did. The figure at the very end of the line, the last lantern bearer, stopped and slowly turned. The light shifted, illuminating a pale oval under the hood for a split second before the face tilted upward, directly toward me. The lantern rose in their hand, arms straightening, until the glass pane caught a reflection from above. From where I sat, it was like the light reached up the side of the canyon, searching. Even through the binoculars, I could not make out features. Only the sense of eyes locking onto mine across an impossible distance. The hum started then. I had not realized there was any sound before. Everything had seemed eerily quiet. But as that last figure held the lantern toward me, a low vibration floated up just on the edge of hearing. It was not singing. It was not speech. It was a single, sustained note, like dozens of voices humming the same tone. It made my teeth ache. The line stopped. All the lanterns tilted slightly inward toward the skull-shaped wall, as if bowing. Then, in perfect unison, every light went out. The darkness that followed was absolute. Even the stars seemed dimmer for a breath. The hum cut off so suddenly my ears rang. I dropped the binoculars, my fingers numb, and scooted back from the edge until my heels hit dirt. Headlights swept across the rim road behind me. A park patrol SUV rolled by, its beams slicing through bushes and across empty rock. When it passed the section where the lanterns had been, there was nothing to see. No glow, no movement, just black stone and shadow. I sat there shaking, trying to decide whether to run to the patrol, wave my arms, tell them what I had seen. But the words would not line up in my head in any way that did not sound insane. Hooded line, lanterns, screams, ritual. It sounded like something out of a bad movie. And if I was wrong, if it had been some sanctioned night operation I did not know about, I would be the staffer who caused trouble. So I did what most people do when the world shows them something that does not fit. I filed it away and pretended I had not seen it. For a while. I lasted another week at the lodge. Then, every time I closed my eyes, the line of lights marched behind my eyelids. Every quiet hallway became a narrow ledge in my mind. I would be folding sheets or wiping a counter and suddenly feel the weight of eyes from below, waiting for me to look down. On my last night, long after I had handed in my badge and uniform, I woke in my cabin from a dream of walking in that line. I was holding a lantern, my arm aching, my feet sliding on loose stone. I could not see the face in front of me, only the patch of ground their light uncovered. Behind me, I knew there was an empty space, waiting for someone else. The worst part was not the sense of inevitability or the boredom of endless walking. It was the certainty that at some point, the front lantern would swing, the line would stop, and the light in my hands would go out. And somewhere high above, on the rim, someone would be looking down, seeing me as just one more flicker in a string of anonymous fire. I left the canyon the next day. I work in a city now, under streetlights and neon signs, where darkness is never complete. But sometimes, when I am crossing a bridge late at night and I see a row of headlights or tail lights stretching ahead in a perfect line, my breath catches. For a heartbeat, they are not cars. They are lanterns on a ledge where no road should be. And I remember the way that last figure raised their light toward me, finding me in all that black. That is the part I cannot shake. Not that I saw them, but that they saw me. As if the canyon was not showing me a secret so much as taking attendance. Everyone keeps telling me I survived that fall off Skull Cliff. But I only half believe them. I remember the rope snapping tight, the crunch of my body hitting rock, and then something I have never been able to explain. Standing upright on a ledge that should not exist, with rows of skull-shaped hollows watching me like an audience. After that, I am not sure the person who walked back up on that rope was entirely me. My name is Finn, and I am not a thrill seeker pretending to know what I'm doing out there. I was the cautious climber, the one who double-checks knots, who reads weather reports twice, who cancels routes when gut feeling and forecast do not match. I guided beginners for years, taught them how to respect the wall, how to understand that gravity does not negotiate. I had climbed in the Grand Canyon before, always on routes I knew, always with partners I trusted. The day I fell started like one of the good ones. Clear sky, cool air, no storms in the forecast. Skull Cliff had a line I liked, a technical but manageable route with solid holds and a clean fall line. Nothing fancy, nothing that should have pushed me beyond my limits. I had done it 3 times in the past, without incident. My partner that day was Sienna, someone I had climbed with enough to know she was reliable, calm, quick with a belay. We checked everything at the top. Harness snug, knots perfect, Anchor solid, rope threaded, calls clear. I remember thinking, as I leaned back over the edge to start the descent, that it felt almost boring in its predictability. The canyon yawed open beneath me, the air rising warm from the depths. And I felt that familiar blend of focus and peace. Hand, foot, shift weight, repeat. The world shrank to stone and skin and breath. I was about 30 meters down when it happened. There was no warning. My right foot was on a hold I had used before, a protruding nub of rock that felt as reliable as a handle. I shifted my weight onto it, and it sheared off under me with a sharp crack, like a bone snapping. For a second I was weightless, swinging out into empty air. The rope burned against my waist, my stomach lurched into my throat. Then the belay caught, hard, slamming me back into the wall sideways. My helmet smacked stone. White light exploded behind my eyes. The last thing I heard before the world went black was Sienna shouting my name from somewhere impossibly far away. I do not know how long I was out. Sienna says it was maybe 3 or 4 seconds, no more. Long enough for the rope to pendulum, short enough that she was still in the same breath when I woke up. But in that pocket of nothing, I lived through something that felt much longer. I was standing on a ledge, not hanging, not spinning, not falling. Standing. My feet were flat on smooth rock, my hands empty at my sides. The air was still and cold, and it did not smell like dust or sun or sweat. It smelled like stone that has never seen light. In front of me was a wall, cut with niches, dozens of them, each about the size of a human body. Most of them held figures, standing motionless, facing outward. I could not see their faces clearly. They were silhouettes, defined only by the faintest gray glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. There was no horizon, no sky, just the ledge under my boots, the wall of hollows, and a drop behind me that I did not need to look at to know it was there. One of the hollows was empty. It was 2 spaces to my left, a neat, clean niche with no figure in it. As I turned my head toward it, every other figure tilted theirs a fraction in my direction, as if tracking the movement with a kind of bored interest. I knew, with a certainty deeper than reason, that the emptiness was for me. It was not a voice that told me this, not words. More like the feeling you get when you walk into a room and someone has been waiting for you. A recognition, a slot that fit my outline, waiting to be filled. All I had to do was step back. That was the sense of it. Not forward, not sideways. Back, into the niche, into the space in the wall where everyone else already stood. Patient and silent and perfectly aligned. There was a promise in it. No more strain, no more choices. Just stillness and stone and the comfort of being exactly where you belong. I do not know what saved me. Maybe it was training, drilled into my muscles more than my mind. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was fear of letting go of control one last time. Whatever it was, I felt my hand jerk, reaching for a rope that was not there in that place, and my mouth formed a word I could not hear. No. The moment I thought it, the ledge disappeared. Gravity returned like a fist. I was hanging against the canyon wall again, the harness digging into my thighs, the rope taut above me. My head throbbed, my vision blurred, then snapped into focus. "You with me?" Sienna yelled from above. "Yeah," I croaked, though my throat felt full of dust. "Yeah, I am here." She lowered me carefully the rest of the way. My legs shook when my feet finally hit the ground. We went through the standard concussion routine, questions, light checks, sitting in the shade until the world stopped tilting. On the surface, it was a minor incident, A fall stopped by good belay, a knock on the head, nothing newsworthy. Inside, something had shifted. Back at the rim, little inconsistencies started to crawl out of the cracks. My watch showed a time 15 minutes later than Sienna's, even though we had synced them that morning. The rope had faint dust smears on a section it should not have passed over, as if it had been dragged along a shelf at a depth we never reached. When I took off my shoes, fine red grit poured out, the kind from deeper layers we had not approached on that route. At the hospital, scans came back clean. No skull fracture, no brain bleed, just a mild concussion. The doctor smiled, told me to rest, and said I was lucky. I nodded, thanked him, and watched how my reflection in the stainless steel fixtures lagged a heartbeat behind my movements whenever I glanced up. People around me started noticing changes before I wanted to admit anything was wrong. My sister said my laugh sounded different, shorter and flatter. A climbing buddy joked that I had become weirdly fearless, taking routes I used to avoid, hanging a second longer on exposed moves. Others said the opposite, that I hesitated now in the middle of things I used to do without thinking, like my body was waiting for a command that never came. Memory, too, began to fray in odd ways. I forgot small shared details, inside jokes, routes we had done together, the name of a diner we had eaten at a dozen times. In exchange, I gained vivid images of places I had never been. A narrow blue canyon with walls polished like glass, a cliff face veined with green stone, a valley full of white pillars under a sky I could not recognize. They came to me in dreams and in waking flashes, like postcards from someone else's life. I told myself it was trauma, the brain doing what brains do under stress. But at night, when I was alone, I could still feel the shape of that empty niche, waiting. A few months later, I went back to Skull Cliff. I told everyone it was to get back in the saddle, to prove to myself I was not afraid of the route that had laid me out. That was partly true. The other part was that I needed to see if the wall would recognize me. I went alone, which was stupid. I did not climb. I just walked to the top of the route and stood near the edge, looking down along the line I had taken before. The rock looked exactly the same. Same cracks, same ledges, same drop. I could not see any hidden shelf where a second world might exist. No shadow line that should not be there. The wind rose, brushing dust against my cheeks. For a second, the sound of it shifted, deepening into something like the murmur of a distant crowd. I stepped back, my stomach flipping. The murmur faded, leaving only the ordinary rush of air. On impulse, I took out my phone and snapped a selfie with the canyon behind me, the way tourists do. When I checked the photo, my heart stumbled. I was there, in the foreground, pale and tired, eyes a little too wide. Behind me, the canyon sprawled, and just barely visible, overlapping my left shoulder, was a faint, translucent outline of a second person. Same height, same stance, same tilt of the head, like a double exposure, except I had taken only one shot. I blinked, looked up and then back at the screen. The outline was still there. I zoomed in. The more I enlarged it, the less detail it had. But the shape did not vanish. It clung to me like a second skin. I deleted the photo. It did not help. The impression of that doubled silhouette stayed in my mind. These days, I do not climb much. When I do, it is on short, indoor routes, where the worst that can happen is a controlled fall onto padded flooring. Friends think I lost my nerve. Some joke that the canyon spooked me straight. I let them. It is easier than trying to explain that I am not afraid of falling. I am afraid of what might be waiting on the ledge between falling and hitting bottom. Sometimes I wake up in the night with my back pressed against an invisible wall, my arms at my sides, my feet shoulder-width apart. I am standing, not lying down. My eyes are open, but I cannot move anything but them. I see rows of shadowed shapes on either side, all facing forward. Then I blink, and I am in my bed, heart racing, sheets twisted around my legs. Other times, I catch my reflection in a window or mirror and see my own eyes looking back a fraction of a second late, like they are thinking about it first, like they are deciding how much of me to show. So did I survive that fall off Skull Cliff? The medical records say yes. The rope, the bruises, the clean CT scan, all of it points to a simple near miss. But when I think about that empty niche, that sense of waiting, I wonder. I did not step into that space. I said no. I clung to the idea of the rope, of the world above, of myself. But something stepped out so there would be room for me to walk away. Something that had been standing there a long, long time, pressed into stone. Maybe that is why I feel slightly misaligned now, like my thoughts sometimes arrive on a delay. Maybe that is why echoes of places I have never been haunt my dreams. Part of me is still on that ledge, filling the gap. Part of me is up here, trying to pretend the fit is seamless. Everyone keeps telling me I survived. I nod, because it is easier than explaining the rest. But when the wind comes up from deep in the canyon and hits my back just right, I can hear a faint, dry rustle. Like a whole line of figures shifting their weight in unison, making room.